Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my power rankings for the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. So a pretty crazy race with a result that we haven't had in a very long time, a non-Red Bull win. Does affect the power rankings in some way, but that being said, I don't want to be too reactionary after one race. That being said, we do have a new driver in 20th place. So dropping one spot from last race is Lance Stroll. So for Stroll, all through practice, well off the pace of his teammate Fernando Alonso, and then in qualifying looked to be one of the slowest drivers on track, and then to make matters worse for the team, had a massive crash at the final corner on his last run in Q1. Luckily for him, didn't knock his teammate out of Q1. That would have been basically the cherry on top of an absolutely awful weekend. But that being said, on account of the damage to the car and the fact that he wasn't feeling great after qualifying, he opted not to participate in the race. And I doubt he would have really gotten that much higher anyway. But yeah, that being said, another really awful weekend for Stroll after several weekends that we've had recently that have been pretty poor. Number 19, moving up one position, but still had a pretty poor week, is Logan Sargent. So for Sargent, out-qualified by Albon again, and as well, he had a little bit of a small mishap during the race, damaged his front wing, putting debris all over the track. But that being said, after that, kept it on track, wasn't particularly fast, did look much slower than his teammate Albon, but got to have that nice battle with Alonso at the end of the race. Number 18, staying in the same spot, is Zhou Guanyu. So for Zhou, another tricky weekend, was out-qualified by his teammate Bottas, and then the race wasn't really particularly noticeable, was towards the back. But that being said, towards the end of the race, after many drivers had taken themselves out, he looked like he might have challenged for some points, but that being said, was kind of lucky to finish ahead of his teammate, given his teammate didn't finish the race. Number 17, so this is where it gets tricky. I have four drivers here who I think have been really, really close on pace, and it was hard for me to decide what order to put them in, so I did bias it slightly towards the result that we had yesterday. So 17th, dropping 3 positions, not particularly poor, but still for Hulkenberg, not a great race. Out-qualified by Magnussen, first time in a while that's happened, and then the race was just kind of sit behind Magnussen for pretty much the whole race, and doesn't get a point, whereas his teammate did. So that's why I've decided to drop him down 3 positions. Now, 16th, this is probably going to be a bit more tricky. So Yuki Tsunoda hasn't completed a racing lap in the last 2 races. Very, very hard to rate him. But that being said, I do think the drivers that I've put above him have been very good. So I'm not dropping him because he's been poor. I'm dropping him because other drivers have been really good. For Tsunoda, really tough luck, I guess, with the race. Kind of got taken out by Perez, went down the escape road. I don't know if it was terminal damage or if he just opted to retire the car. But if it was just a puncture, I figure he could have come back to the pits and get new tires. That being said, not great for Tsunoda. Was out-qualified by Lawson. I know he didn't set a lap in Q2. I don't know what happened the second lap. The first lap, I know he looked like he was impeded, but second lap, not really sure. Number 15, moving up 2 positions. Really good race for this driver, and that is Kevin Magnussen. So Kevin Magnussen, last 5 or 6 years, has proven to be somewhat of a Singapore Grand Prix specialist. 2019, and I believe last year, 2022, sets the fastest lap of the race. This year qualifies well into the top 10 and gets a 10th place finish for his efforts, which in the Haas, which we know is absolutely terrible on its tires, that's a great result for him. So as a result, moves up 2 positions. Number 14, also moving up 2 positions. First Formula 1 points for this driver, Liam Lawson. So absolutely great result for him. First points in F1, first points that car shared between himself, Ricciardo, and De Vries. Those are the first points that car has gotten. So great result for him. I know he fell off quite a bit towards the end pace-wise on account of kind of, I guess, eating up his tires a bit too quickly. But that being said, for his first time out at Singapore, really good result for him. And I think he's built a really compelling case for himself for Red Bull to keep him in that AlphaTauri seat for next year. Number 13, dropping one position, is Valtteri Bottas. So for Bottas, he doesn't drop down because he was poor. I dropped him down because there's another driver I wanted to move up. But for Bottas, out-qualified Joe in the race wasn't particularly noticeable, but with the Alfa Romeo's pace, I don't think that's the end of the world. But he's doing what he has to, keeping his nose clean, out-qualifying his teammate, and it seems like he broke down with some kind of mechanical issue, given that we didn't get any kind of replay afterwards. Number 13, dropping down one position, is Sergio Perez. So for Perez, a bit of a tricky race, had contact with Tsunoda opening lap and then had contact with Albon towards the end and was given a 5-second penalty. Luckily for him, he had built enough of a gap to Lawson in P9 that he was able to hold that position without, so basically rendering the penalty useless. That being said, did have a bit of a tricky race, finished 30 odd seconds or so behind his teammate Verstappen, had a really tricky Saturday as well. Number 11, moving up 4 positions, which is odd for a driver who DNF'd, but I was honestly really impressed with Ocon's race up to that point. Qualified really well up in middle of Q3, middle of the top 10. The race looked really good, was up in 5th and 6th, 7th place, having some really good battles with Ocon and Perez as well. And then unfortunately it all goes away from him when he had a mechanical failure and ground to a halt out on the middle of the track. So really rough luck for him, but I thought really good job as well. So into the top 10 we go. Number 10, staying in the same position, is Pierre Gasly. So for Gasly, knocked out in Q2, was out qualified by his teammate Ocon, but that being said, had a really good race. He was behind his teammate for the most part of the race before he retired. That being said, I thought did a really good job of putting himself up in that really strong P6 position. Number 9, also staying in the same position, is Oscar Piastri. So for Piastri, I think he's almost a bit lucky that he was kind of knocked out in Q1 the way he did, with Stroll basically clattering into the wall, throwing that red flag. Throughout the practice sessions, he never really had looked like he had the 1-lap pace, so he probably would have been knocked out there's possible he would be knocked out into Q2. But that being said, he has the excuse of the red flag for him being knocked out in Q1. But that being said, he made a really good recovery drive, recovered all the way to 7th place. Still not as good of a result as his teammate, but that being said, that's a really, really high bar to cross. And I think for first time out at Singapore, really good job for Piastri. Number 8, dropping one position, Charles Leclerc. So for Leclerc, tough weekend, I think. A weekend where I think the first time in a long time, he really looked like he could have had a chance at a pole position and a race win. Unfortunately, his teammate had a really, really strong weekend. His teammate is the one who gets the pole and the win. And for Leclerc, he's looked a little bit off the pace of Sainz all weekend. And he made a couple mistakes as well, letting that mistake that let Hamilton through, I think is one that comes to mind as well. But still, 4th place for him, not too bad overall. Number 7, moving up one position, is George Russell. So qualifies front row, excellent qualifying result in the race, going hard for a podium, and then it all goes away from him in 3rd place on the final lap of the race. Watching the crash, it looks like something broke on the car right before. You could tell something just moved on the car on his onboard and from the offboard camera as well. You could see that it looked like the front suspension or something broke right before the crash. So what I'm going to assume, it's not driver error, it looked like some kind of mechanical issue. Really rotten luck for him. And of course his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who is yet to show up on this power ranking, kind of inherited his podium position. Number 6, dropping 3 positions. I think a weekend with several uncharacteristic mistakes for Fernando Alonso. Picked up that 5-second penalty for crossing the white line on the pit entry. It's a big no-no, bit of a silly mistake there. And then he went deep. That really, after the long straight, after the Anderson Bridge, kind of had to spin himself around to get back out of that corner. Lost a couple of positions doing that. Of course, he had the super long pit stop as well, but that wasn't his fault. But still, nonetheless, really tough weekend for Alonso. Number 5, staying in the same position, is Lewis Hamilton. So for Hamilton, overall, I think a good result. I think he'll probably wish he qualified a bit higher and was in a bit of a stronger position through the start and the middle phase of the race. He of course decided to cut turn 1 to try to pick up go up to P3. Of course, had to give those positions back. Had some good battles through the race. I think was a bit lucky, as I said, was a bit lucky to inherit that podium. But that being said, he'll take it as he now moves into P3 in the Drivers' Championship. Number 4, dropping 2 positions, is Alex Albon. So I don't think Albon had a poor weekend, and after looking at the replay of the incident between himself and Perez, definitely, I think, unlucky not to get points. He would have been on pace for a P9 if he hadn't been shoved into the wall by Perez, and that would have been 2 more really crucial points for the team. Of course, I think at this point they have a very good chance of still holding that P7 position in the Constructors. So really, at this point, unless we get an absolutely crazy race of attrition in the last several races of the year, I think, Williams, any extra points from here on out will just be the cherry on the top for Williams' season. Number 3, moving up 3 positions, my driver of the weekend, absolutely epic race by this driver, I felt, and that is Carlos Sainz, moving up 3 positions. Now, of course, if this was a power rankings for just this race, Sainz would be number 1, no questions asked. But I like to take a bit of a more long-term approach to my power rankings, don't like to be too reactionary, and so I've decided to kind of gradually move them up 3 positions. But that being said, this is the highest that Sainz has been all year. And yeah, I think there's not much more to say really. He was great in qualifying, takes pole position, I think controlled the race very well, managed his tires very well, made sure that he was always had enough tire life so that if he had to pick up the pace, he was able to do so and didn't really make any mistakes. Number 2, moving up 2 positions, is Lando Norris. I think Norris really happy with the result from this weekend, a P2. I believe second P2, third P2. I don't know. Did he get a P2 in Hungary? I don't remember. But nonetheless, ties a season high and career high result. Really good result for him. I think he could have maybe done a little bit better in qualifying, but that being said, still I think an excellent result for Norris. And then number 1, this will be maybe slightly controversial to have Verstappen still P1 after his worst result of the season, points-wise P5. But that being said, I think Red Bull just had a really flat out did not have the fastest car this weekend. I don't know if it was 4th fastest, 5th fastest over 1 lap pace. We're not really sure at this point. But the race, I think Red Bulls were very unlucky with the strategy. Sargent bringing out the safety car when they did. It was a perfect time to pit for basically everyone except themselves. So they basically had a lot of work to do with the strategy that they were given. That being said, Verstappen was well clear of his teammate Perez. The gap in qualifying was a little smaller than we would normally expect. But in the race, I think he showed why he is a double world champion, made a lot of really good overtakes, and made his way all the way up to P5 after basically being dropped to P15 after his pit stop on track. That's very, very hard to overtake. And I do think, better result overall than his race last year, where he did make that mistake. So there's my power rankings for the Singapore Grand Prix. Luckily for us, we only have to wait a week until our next race in a week's time at the Japanese Grand Prix. So that should be an exciting one, very different track, and we shall see if kind of the results that we saw this past weekend are a precursor for things to come, or if it was just a one-off weekend. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.